I'm Christine, and today is our last week of our first series of the year, the Refresh the Year series. And what better topic than to have a discussion on our personal finances as well as where we're at in the economy. So, can we have a huge hand of applause for David, who's going to be presenting for us? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. For those that don't know me, David, nice to meet everybody. I'm a financial planner with CIBC. I've been doing this now for about 5 years. I've been doing portfolio advising for the last 3 out of the last 5. Prior to that, I did do a lot of mortgage business and such as well. So I can sit here and, have a general lecture with you folks, but I thought, how can I best help or impart a little bit of advice in everybody? So before we get started, we'll do a little bit of financial trivia, and for those of you that actually win this trivia, I got a little prize for you at the end. You come see me and we'll take care of you. I kind of wanted to open up the floor. Last time I did this talk, it was COVID, and I had to kind of just lecture through a screen. This time it's a little bit more in person. I actually want to hear from all of you any questions, concerns, anything. It doesn't have to be a personal thing or anything like that, but I want to be at service for you. So if you have any questions that pertain to you, I'd like you to think of them right now. And then once we open up the floor for questions, I'd genuinely like to field them. So first and foremost, I got a couple of trivia questions for us here. First things first, who here has ever invested in anything? Everybody's got a tax-free savings account? Good. Everybody have an RRSP? Okay, all right. Some yes, some no. Anybody here have a property? A property. Okay. So some people here are in just as much debt as I'm in, is what I'm hearing. Okay, all right. That's okay. We're going to talk about all this. So I have a couple of trivia questions here for you guys. Feel free to throw your hand up, and the first person that's got that throws their hand up will get a little prize at the end of this year. So first off, can anybody tell me what percentage of your annual income can be contributed to an RRSP? Go for it. 18%, or there's a dollar amount. Close. Yeah. Close. Very good. 18%, that's what it was. That's fine. Up to 29,000. 29, yeah. The principal residence exception is, this is a really tricky one. You have a property. There's an exemption when you sell your property. Can you tell me what that is, Steve? Nope. There's 4 answers. There's four lines here, okay? It's an A, B, C, or D. All right, it's a is it a tax exemption for seniors who sell their home? Is it a deduction for those helping their children buy their first home? Or a tax credit for home renovations? Or a tax exemption for capital gains on your primary residence? It's the last one. That's right. Can anybody tell me what Mr. Trudeau wants to do in the next year and a half to 2 years? We're not getting into the politics of it, but what legislation is being put forward to maybe that might affect that rule? It's going to be a little bad if you're a property flipper. Yeah, exactly. It might not be something about it. So basically what they want to do is, if you are buying a property and you sell it within 1 year, they want to make you essentially liable for the full capital gain. Can anybody tell me what capital gains are? Yeah, exactly. So pretty much the way the capital gain works is, I thought somebody wanted to say something. Exactly. So you buy a property for $1 million, you sell it for 1.1 million. The government's going to take 50% of that and tax you accordingly to your income at the end of the year, okay? This is a trick question. What's the best method for calculating how much income you need for retirement? Go for it. So that's not a bad way of looking at it, but the actual truth is it's a very different thing. For some people, it's not 75%. For some people, it's 40%. So that's kind of a trick question. It's different from person to person. When there's any economic uncertainty, avoiding the stock market is the best method to keep your money safe. Is this a true or false question? Why is it false? It does. But given the amount of time that you spend in the market, the stock market will always do well. I want to kind of put this chart here in front of you. I know it looks very complicated, but this chart actually is, I'm going to simplify it for you. This chart just tells you what the stock market, inflation, a US fund would have done from 1934 going straight to 2022. And you can see here, every large socioeconomic or war or anything like that recession has been graphed for you. So this is essentially what the value of $1,000 was back in 1934. Inflation, can anybody tell me what inflation is? It's true. Inflation is just the general cost of everything going up in value, right? Your cost of milk last year is not the same as cost of milk today. Cost of gas last year is more today. So inflation in 1934, if we had pegged it at $1,000 today, that same $1,000 would be worth $15,000. Had you invested in just the general US stock market, your $1,000 as of today, now keep in mind, 2022 was probably one of the ugliest years we've had on the stock market, would be worth about $12,400,000. So this, although this puts it on a broad spectrum for us, this really shows us the power of being invested in the stock market for a very, very, very long period of time. So over the last year, we've experienced, our generation at least, has experienced something that I don't think has been experienced at all since maybe some of our parents came to Canada, or if your parents were born in Canada, probably not since the 80s or 90s. We've experienced very rampant inflation, we've experienced a housing crisis, and we've experienced interest rates going up. Those things are going to affect your pockets at the end of the day. So what I want to do today is kind of relate to you. I want to get an idea of really what is affecting you on the day-to-day. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? How can I assist you to kind of walk through that? So does anybody have anything right now that they kind of want me to take a stab at? Sure. It's true. For sure. So I'll give you an idea of how we kind of talk about retirement planning. We talk about retirement planning of having an income by the time you retire at the age of 65. Now, some people choose to retire earlier, people choose to retire later. But when we do our planning, we do it based off 65 years of age to a life expectancy of 95 years of age. Now, that can vary from here to there, right? The truth of the matter is, nowadays, yes, you do need between 1.5 and $2 million to retire comfortably, right? I'll give you an example. We did a pension analysis for a teacher who has a very good pension. They're going to get about net $60,000 to $65,000 every year. In order for you to have a fund, because some of us don't have pensions, some of us don't have a pension that's tied to inflation like a teacher would or a government worker would, you would need to have a portfolio that's valued at $1.5 million to get that $60,000 or $65,000 every year. That's assuming you have no debt in retirement, you're not going to be trying to help your kids buy a home or anything like that. So yes, it is very controversial, and we're growing up in a different climate right now. We're growing up in a climate where there's a lot more uncertainty, right? A lot of people over here own properties. When was the last time, when you bought your property from where it's at right now, how many people can tell me that their property value's gone up exponentially? Probably a few of you, right? Unless you bought in the last year, then I wish you luck. We'll have a chat about that later on. But our generation's kind of going through something weird where we're stuck economically, right? Capitalism as a whole has kind of driven just pure aspect of just pure growth and left everything behind. So yes, that article does say you need between 1.7 and $2 million. It's a factuality depending on really what kind of a lifestyle you want to live, right? I hope that's kind of answered your question. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can get to that point, right? So, for example, who here has a pension through work? Great. But I see a lot of hands that are down. You don't have a pension through work. So how are you going to supplement yourself in retirement? I'm asking. Anybody have any ideas? Please. For sure. CPP, I have a sign in my office that says, if you are relying on the government to be your retirement plan, you will lose. And that is because CPP and old age security, yes, it's poised to grow. And one of our chief economists is actually an active advisor for the CPP as well. But we don't know what's going to happen down the line. By the time most of us are taking CPP, it's going to be 25, 30 years from now. And really, we don't even know if there will be a CPP in old age security at that point. I saw another hand as well. Sure. I think you pegged it very well. So when we look at retirement planning, we look at the future, we look at your hand. You got 5 fingers on each hand. Each one of those fingers you should think of as a revenue stream or a pillar of your retirement. You have your tax-free savings account, you have your RRSPs, you have hopefully your government pension at the time. We don't know if that's going to happen or not. Real estate, and as well as any other investments that you choose to do, right? While we're on the topic of investments, can anybody here kind of tell me, how do you invest on the stock market? What avenues of investing do you typically take? There's 3 different ways in Canada. Well, it's simple, so that's a brokerage, but within that brokerage, you have an account. What kind of account is it? Non-registered. Yeah. Yes. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, well, simple, yeah, no commissions at all. But you're on the hook for managing your own portfolio, which is, hey, not a bad thing. It's good to have your own skin in the game. So in Canada, great investments. But what I'm asking is, how do I invest in those things? What are the 3 options for me of investing in those things? I want to shelter as much as I can, right? So the first way you're going to do it is you're going to invest through a tax-free savings account. Now, can anybody tell me what the limit is up until this year that you have available in your tax-free savings account if you were 18 in 2009? Close. Atta girl. 88,000. This year, the government has given us $6,500 worth of extra contribution room. So keep in mind one thing. What we're telling most of our clients right now is, please. So if you've never contributed to a tax-free savings account, you could go into your bank tomorrow, set up a tax-free for yourself, and put 88,000 bucks in right away. Can you tell me what happens if you withdraw that $88,000 the next day? You can't contribute back to it until the next year. It's not new, it's always been like that. Yeah. So the first way of investing through index funds, stocks, ETFs, bonds, GICs, all that stuff is through a tax-free savings account. Can anybody tell me the second way? You already said it once. Yeah. The first way you did it. Personal account. Now, what we call that is a non-registered account. What that means is that it's not registered by your social insurance number. So anything that you do in that account is completely taxable. The government's going to ask you for your soul. Yes. What's the third way of investing? You can, but most companies will do it through a pension plan or they'll do it through other ways. But that pension plan's either set up as a defined contribution plan or anything like that. But even those eventually turn into a form of an RRSP. So the third way of investing is through an RRSP. Now, what happened? Can anybody here tell me what happens when you contribute any money to an RRSP? What happens to your income that year? Exactly. So the thought process behind your RRSP is that I'm going to pay less income now. I'm going to invest my money. I'm going to pay less taxes on my income now. I'm going to invest my money. I'm only going to be able to withdraw the money in my RRSP in two ways. Can anybody tell me what those two ways are? Well, there's three ways, but tell me what the two are prior to retirement. First-time home buyer, perfect. What's the second way? Exactly. Who here has a master's or a PhD or anything like that? Perfect. You should be doing this talk. You could have used your RRSPs to fund that. Now, there's rules around that. So can anybody tell me what the rules are of if you withdraw money from your RRSP, what do you have to do? The government's not going to let you off the hook. Remember, the CRA wants their tax dollars, right? Close. So you have to pay it back. You're right. We have to pay it back within 15 years. Otherwise, there's tax implications for you, right? So those are typically the three ways of investing. Now, you hit the nail on the head. You can buy stocks, ETFs, bonds, GICs, any of those kind of investment vehicles through any one of those accounts, okay? The age group that everybody's at right now, well, before I get into that, who here has ever invested in a GIC? Okay. Can you tell me what a GIC is? Yeah, Steve. Close. Guaranteed investment certificate. It's like a high interest savings account. Your money's usually locked in for a period of time. You get a little bit of simple interest on it, and then you get your money back at the end of the year. It's a great short-term investment if you need the funds in the next year or two, right? You want to keep it safe, you want to keep it somewhat accessible, and you want to earn a little bit of money on it. The issue with a GIC for a long-term investment is that in terms of interest rates, up until this year, for the last 4 or 5 years, a regular GIC locked up for 1 year would have paid anywhere between 0.5% and 1%. So yeah, you're earning 1% on your money, but you're actually losing money to inflation. Now, who here can kind of tell me where inflation's been for the last year? 7 to 8%. Now, that's what the government's telling us. They're telling us it's 7 or 8%. Who here has gone to the gas pump or milk, or went to buy milk or buy groceries or anything like that? Is it actually 7 or 8%? No, it's probably closer to 12 or 13, right? So the thought process here is if I'm going to put my money in an investment and I'm going to put it in for the long term and I'm going to try and grow a secondary pension for myself, I want to try and beat that 10% mark because some years the government targets inflation at 2 to 3%. We probably won't see it hit that range for another couple of years, although that was their target for the previous years prior to. So what am I going to utilize? I'm going to utilize the stock market. Now you can see here, if we just look back, going back to 2008 during the last financial crisis, which is this big dip right here. Who can tell me what happened here back in 2020? That little dip right there. Something big. COVID. We had clients lined up outside of our offices saying, sell everything, the world is going, that's it. I want all my money and I want to put it in my mattress. Now, we tried to do our best to convince those people otherwise. And those people that chose to listen to us, 6 months later, you can see where the chart is. Any gains that they had lost by the end of 2021, they had done very well for themselves. Now, I don't have 2022 up there, but 2022 probably looks a little bit more like this, which is a very great time for you. Every single time you see that dip, or you hear on the media, the market's going down, everything's going down, there's a very famous guy who's a very famous, what we call contrarian investor. He goes against what everybody else is doing. He says, when there's blood on the streets, I typically want to be buying. Anybody tell me who that is? Warren Buffett. So now my advice to everybody here is quite simple, is at the end of the day, if you don't have a tax-free savings account, you don't have an RSP, you don't have a non-registered plan or anything like that, get out there, set something up for yourself. Because we are in that point of time right now where interest rates are extremely high, the market's low, but it's not going to stay like this forever. Interest rates are poised. Now, the big banks believe that interest rates at the end of the year are going to come down. I think that's a little bit ambitious, but I think going into next year, interest rates will come down. Now, we had spoken before. Some people here have mortgages. Does anybody have a variable mortgage? All right. It's brutal. It's brutal. I was reading this kind of general analysis of somebody who had $1 million mortgage that was sitting at 1.5%, and now their variable mortgage is sitting at 5.5%. The cost of that $1 million mortgage at 1.5% was about $4,000 a month. That same mortgage is sitting at closer to $6,500 a month today. Sorry, go ahead. Please. Yeah. Yeah, it's a high interest savings account. Yeah, so when interest rates go up, we base interest rates off prime, right? Prime, can anybody just, I mean, I don't expect anybody to know this, but can anybody tell me what prime is today? He's getting a gift at the end of this. 6.7%. So can you tell me what prime was last year in January? You were wrong, sir. I'm taking back that gift. Prime last year was 2.45%. So let me put it to you in perspective, okay? If you yeah, the heartburn's real. The heartburn's real for me because I have to explain to one client why their mortgage rates have gone up and the other client why their investments went down last year. But, so we base it off prime. And when prime goes up, the bank has to increase their cost of lending. But on the plus side, if you have cash, they'll pay you their 2.6%, and in some cases, they'll pay you up to 4.25. If you shop around, there's some pretty good interest rates out there for short-term savings. But keep in mind, if they're paying you 4.25% and they're lending out at 5-point-something%, you're still losing, right? You're not gonna beat them. They're gonna win no matter what, right? The idea is you want to get the most bang for your buck. So I actually encourage anybody who's sitting there in cash right now, reevaluate your situation. If it's money you don't need on the spot and it's money you plan on kind of putting away to invest for the long term, now's a great time to buy into the market, right? So I kind of wanted to go, before I continue, does anybody have any specific questions? We're good? Okay. Please. So keep in mind, I'm 30 years old, 31, although I look like I'm 50. At 31 years old, I know my time horizon, the time that I'm actually going to need to utilize these funds, is more than 10 to 15 years. So my objective is growth for my portfolio. So my recommended vehicle is the stuff that you said, the index funds, the ETFs, the individual stocks. My goal is growth, right? There's three asset classes. I'm going to explain this to you. When you invest in a portfolio, we look at equities such as stocks and like individual stocks, share ownership of a company. We look at fixed income, which is bonds, dividend income. Can anybody tell me what a bond is? Government bond. Exactly. Very good. Did everybody hear that? A bond is literally like a loan to the government, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong. So when we think of building a portfolio for clients that are in their different stages of life, we may include all three asset classes: stocks, fixed income, the third asset class being cash. Just leaving money sitting there so that we can rebalance your portfolio whenever we want to. Now, for a guy at my age, my portfolio is going to look very different from a guy who's 50 years old. A guy who's 50 years old is going to have probably a more balanced portfolio where there's 50% stock, 50% fixed income. And then as they age, it'll shift more towards fixed income. A guy my age is more 80% stock, 20% fixed income, right? I want that dividend growth, but at the same time, I really want to strive for the longer term capital appreciation. I want my money to grow as far as possible, right? I just pulled up this kind of general investment calculator, right? Now, I label it as tax-free savings account, but you can label it whatever you want to. Vacation fund, my future Lamborghini, whatever it is that you want, right? But this kind of shows you how the benefits of time and the benefits of your money growing for you actually work for you. So this, we can play around with this calculator. Does anybody want me to put any specific figures in here right now? Right now I have it only set up as a $10,000 initial contribution and $250 every couple weeks lined up with your pay. Anybody want me to change these numbers around a little bit? See what anybody have any curiosity? Sure. So typically, if we're talking 6 months, we don't even bring up the subject of investing in stocks, markets, any of that stuff. You're looking at short-term cashable GICs. You're looking at high-interest savings accounts. And the reason is because you have identified that I need that money in 6 months. So your risk is zero. You need the money in 6 months. So zero risk. When we talk GICs, guaranteed investment certificates, I want you to remember there's two different kinds. There's redeemable, meaning you can take them out at any time you want, and non-redeemable, meaning they're locked up and you can't break them during that period to take your money out, unless at the share there's like financial hardship, death, or anything like that, okay? Cashable GICs, because they're more accessible, they pay less interest. So I'll give you an example. We have a cashable GIC right now. It fluctuates with the prime rate from Bank of Canada. Right now it pays 4%, okay? But you can take the money out anytime you want. Every 30 days, interest is calculated. If you leave the money in there for 30 days, you get the interest for that month. But you can take it out anytime you want. We have a non-redeemable GIC for 2 years that pays out 5% per year. So your money's locked in for 2 years, but you're getting 5%. Now, those types of investments are a little bit more appropriate for somebody who already has wealth or somebody that has a short-term goal in the next 2 years, whether it's to buy a house or whether it's to buy a car or whatever it is, education, whatever it is. But think timeline, okay? Does anybody have any other questions? Did I answer that for you? So I'll tell you, honestly, when it comes to portfolio investing, stocks, bonds, that kind of stuff, anything less than 3 years, we won't touch it. It's any advisor is going to sit there and tell you, you're going to have to assume risk. And if you need that money in such a short period of time, I'll give you an example. If I had put your money on the market for you last January in something like an index fund, a NASDAQ index fund that just follows the NASDAQ, from January last year to December last year, you'd be down 28%. Sure, you might make some more money this year, but this year is probably going to be a volatile year as well, which is why we do not advise clients to put money on the market unless they have a longer time horizon. Does that answer your question? Yeah, of course. If you do want to get into it a little bit more, but you don't like this, just feel free to email me. So you're talking about option trading? That's very high risk. We do employ some of those strategies, but that is very high risk. We will not, like if I've had clients come up to me and say, this is what I want to do, this is my time frame. If the time frame is less than 3 years, go find another financial advisor. It's not a risk I'm willing to take for you. You can do it yourself. Keep in mind, there's two ways of investing. There's self-directed and there's managed. We focus on the managed portion. The managed portion is less Lamborghini and more Toyota Camry. It's more reliable. It's more economical. We focus on building a proper base, long-term growth, minimizing as much risk in your portfolio possible, beating inflation, but minimizing risk is always going to be the name of the game. We, for instance, when I do my own self-directed trading, I'm not trying to strive for 10%. I'm trying to strive for 50, 60% returns, right? I might employ some of those derivative options in there, right? But my managed portfolio targets a rate of 10 to 15 at the most, because that is long-term, that's boring, it's got dividends in it, it's got, good, solid blue chip companies that we know are going to be worth something. That's kind of the stuff that we do more so. But when you do self-directed, you have the ability to go into the kind of more flashy stuff that you're talking about, right? And if you want to talk more about that, by all means, we can, I'll give you my phone number, we can have a chat about that. Please. Yes. For sure. Can I ask, without getting too much into it, who here has just recently graduated university? I mean, everybody here is relatively, what's that? Within the last 3 years. Nice. Oh, hey, how's it going? So, fresh out of university, you're thinking, what's my next step? Maybe it's I want to continue education. Maybe it's I want to buy a house or buy a condo. In some cases, it's I want to get married, right? Unless you're wise. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, sweetheart. But when you're at that point, you're working on building. So you may have some student debt, you may be graduating with no debt, you may be entering your first job. That point of life is where typically you can take on the most amount of risk, I can argue, right? So fresh out of university or 5 years out of university, whatever it is, you have, you might be still living at home depending on what your situation is. Your expenses may not be very high. This is the time where you can take a little bit more risk in your portfolio. You can be more aggressive with it. You can choose to start your own business. You can do all that kind of stuff. But the idea is that you have the ability of taking on much more risk versus the person who just got married or is in the cusp of getting married and about to start a family. You still have the ability of taking on some risk, but your expenses are about to increase quite a bit. You may be looking to purchase your first home if you haven't done so already. You're going to be putting finances together, which may complicate things a little bit as well. You're dealing with somebody else's spending habits versus your own. There may be some wake-up calls. But the idea is that at that point of life, your expenses have increased. You may want to pull back your portfolio and change the idea of how you invest. Now, once you kind of get married or even if that's not your path, you purchase your first property, you're more established in your career, you're earning more money, that's the time where you can reevaluate your cash flow and you've maybe paid down some of your debt and you have the ability to put more towards your investments. I don't know about any of you, but I grew up with a dad who was not my best friend growing up. I kind of got my first job when I was, I worked at his gas station when I was 14 years old, barely able to see over I'm not a tall guy, but even then I was pretty short. And dad used to take each one of my paychecks. He was a savage with me. He took every single paycheck I had. And when I wanted to go out with my friends, he used to say, what do you want to do? What do you need? How much money do you need? And if I said $100, I had to justify that $100. When I got into university, he gave me a check. And that check was all the money I would have quite honestly, wasted at that time. So for myself, at the point of life that I'm at, I always ask myself, do I need this? Do I want this? How do I want my finances to look over the next year? And it always comes back to saying, I got my paycheck, I paid my mortgage, I paid my bills. Whatever's left over, what am I spending it on, right? Once you get into that point of life where you have children, now you're going to start talking about education planning, right? For this group, it's not really a conversation that I really need to get into, although if you want me to, I can. But nobody here is thinking about RESPs or anything like that, right? Peter? No? All right, yeah. So the point of life that most of us are at right now, or in that point of life where we are thinking of, okay, what's our cash flow? How can I increase my cash flow? How am I able to utilize the existing cash flow that I have to go towards my investments, deal with my expenses, and so on, right? And that's where I still encourage you, reevaluate your goals. Where do you want to be financially 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 15 years from now? And really, what do you want your debts to look like, and what do you want your investments to look like, right? It's not a straightforward answer for each person. Lots of 31-year-olds like myself are they're thinking of buying they've got kids. They're thinking, I want to set up my kids' education fund. I'm not thinking about that stuff, right? I'm thinking, how do I get my next property? How do I, make it so I'm retired by the time I'm 40, which isn't going to happen right now, right? Do we have any other questions? Do you have any other questions related to that? By all means. So self-employed people at the bank, we love you guys. You make our life miserable. Mortgages for self-employed people are, any underwriter is going to ask for your firstborn. But you have a lot more ability to shelter things. So I would advise, if you're self-employed, get yourself a really good accountant, right? Not a shady accountant, a good accountant, right? But you want to be able to utilize the fact that now you have a corporation where you can move things under, you can move certain investments under. You can invest on the personal side, you can invest on the corporation. There's a whole bunch of options available to you. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of self-employed are you? Like a pharmacist? I mean, hold on. She's not a pharmacist. Okay. All right. You're a physiotherapist. Okay, very good. So think about how you want to grow that corp, right? You're going to have a lot of money sitting there at some point. What do I want to do with it? Am I going to use that to invest in a business? What am I going to use that money for in the next 2 years? If it's for a business, what vehicle can I use for the next 2 years to get me to that business, right? Now, also keep in mind, lending is a huge thing. And I'm surprised nobody here has actually talked to me about mortgages or lending or anything like that yet. We kind of talked about mortgages, but not really. So you use that I would suggest get yourself a good business advisor. And typically one financial advisor can take care of both sides for you, but you're going to want to have that discussion about really where you want to be in the next couple of years, especially utilizing that corporation. Do we have any other questions? Please. Sure. The question was, is there an income level that would make sense basically for you to be incorporated? The answer is typically not something I can answer for you. I would say have a chat with an accountant. They might tell you, for the kind of structure and sole proprietorship might be better, but I would say personally, if I'm making over 120, 130, I'm going to incorporate myself, right? In some cases, it may make sense to do it less than that, right? Have a chat with your accountant. And the investment stuff we can cover for you, the tax stuff and whether or not you incorporate, because incorporation comes with its own sets of fees, right? Your taxes are a little bit more complicated. My advice to you, anybody here looking to buy a property in the next couple of years? Okay. Great. You're self-employed. You're looking to buy a property in the next couple of years. Awesome. Make sure you got 2 years worth of show that income. We get caught up in the whole sense of, we want to kind of minimize our tax footprint and all that kind of stuff. But when we come to apply for a mortgage, the bank's going to say, well, what did you report on the personal side, and in your case, on the business side? So just keep that in mind. If you're not self-employed, 2 years worth of income, you want to show as much income as possible. That'll help with your application. Now, I have a question for you guys. There's two things that we look at when we're doing a mortgage for somebody. What are those two things? They're ratios. Can anybody tell me? Okay, TDSR and GDSR. Okay. Can you tell me what those ratios are in the back? So you're right. So there's gross debt servicing ratio and total debt servicing ratio. Total debt servicing ratio has to sit at a specific number as a maximum. That's 39%. You make $10,000 a month, the bank is going to look at your overall housing situation at 39%. So that means no more than $3,900 out of your $10,000 income can be used to take care of all of your housing expenses. We're talking heating, property taxes, and mortgage. What's gross debt servicing ratio? Do you know what the number on that is? The girl in the white sorry, I'm going to ask her. The girl in, close. So, I shouldn't say this, but Bank of Montreal goes up to 48%. Most other banks stay at 44%. 44% encompassing your mortgage, property tax, heat, and any other debts you have. Who here has a car payment? When you go to who here has a car payment outside of a corporation? Okay. When you go to apply for a mortgage, your car payment is going to eat away at how much money you're going to get from the bank. It's not a defined number, but for typically speaking, every time you have $250 worth of car payment, it takes away almost $100,000 worth of lending we'll give you. I'll give you an example. A client who had an $850 car payment and an $850 car payment per month. You say, wow, but if you want to go get what your standard BMW or Mercedes or Lexus, or I think a Corolla nowadays is like $500, if you can even get one. Yeah. So leasing is one of those things where, once again, everybody's financial situation is a little bit different, but it's one of those things where I always recommend, it's not really going to be a net positive for you unless it makes sense for your overall situation. You drive your cars quite a bit. We won't even get into that. But this person had an $850 car payment every month, and they had a $450,000 mortgage. Their house was valued at $1.5 million. And what we were trying to do is refinance their property to give them what's called a home equity line of credit. So they could take advantage of the equity in their home. Without the car payment, we could have qualified them for roughly $500,000. But because they had the car payment, they got $75,000. Makes a big difference. And keep in mind, some of us have other kinds of debt, right? You have student loans, whatever it is. That all plays into effect when you're getting a mortgage. So the other thing I wanted I'm going to ask, does anybody have any questions so far about anything I've said? Not necessarily. I'm leasing my car. I'm a hypocrite. Yeah, but it makes sense for my situation because I beat the crap out of my cars, right? I don't want it after 4 years. I want to give it back to them and go get something else, right? But I only have one car payment, right, in my household. So when you're getting a mortgage, when you guys went to go, whoever here has a mortgage, when you went to the bank, they approved you for the maximum that they could approve you for. Am I wrong? Or did they just base it off the property valuation? Like who here, when they went to go get their mortgage, the advisor said, yeah, we can qualify you for this, but this is only really what you need. Anybody hear that? Good. I'm happy. That makes my job a lot easier because that's not what we've seen on the market so far. Um, a lot of people here who don't have properties are about to enter a point in time where it might make sense for you to buy a property, right? Property valuations come down when interest rates go up. And we've seen in some areas in the GTA over the last year, some places have lost 20% worth of value. The big thing here is going to be the drawdown between interest rates being ridiculous. A 5-year fixed rate. Who here can tell me what a 5-year fixed mortgage goes for on average? Right now. You can get a 4.99 mortgage for 5 years. You sign that thing today. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that because rates are dropping next year. Remember what I said. But the idea is that's a very good rate. 4.99 right now it's a great rate. I was telling a couple of people here before, we had a client of ours a few years ago where we did a $1.7 million mortgage for them. And I remember having a discussion with the client at the time saying, you're maxing out everything to get this mortgage. And we managed to get them a 1.99% fixed mortgage rate for 7 years. And they chose to go with a variable mortgage. Can anybody tell me what a fixed mortgage is and what a variable mortgage is? Yeah, give it a shot. Come on, tell me. Whichever one of you, yeah. For sure. It will fluctuate based off prime. Yeah. So a variable mortgage is purely based off the prime banking rate, right? So right now, prime is 6.7%. Our 3-year variable is 6.4%. Our 5-year variable is 6.35%. At $1.7 million at the time, that client chose to go with a variable mortgage at 1.39. Their mortgage payment, I think at the time was like $4,500 or $5,000, something like that. That mortgage payment now is closer to $8,000, right? So when you go to apply for a mortgage and the bank approves you for the maximum, remember, that might not be your best interest. Can anybody tell me, anybody who's bought a house before, can anybody tell me other costs that have been incurred? Closing costs. How much can those roughly be in terms of percentage? The going rate is 2%. What's 2% on $1 million property? A lot of money after signing up for being in debt for the next 20 years, right? What's another big expense or a big shock for people when they close on their mortgage? Well, hopefully nobody here has to worry about that just yet, but yeah, land transfer tax is a big one as well. But there's another thing that was a kick in my pants. The lawyer, honestly, wasn't even that bad. The lawyer could tell me. Property taxes. Property taxes. Where I live, property taxes are, I want to go riot at City Hall every weekend. You know what I mean? Property taxes are a big thing. We think about the mortgage payment, but we never think about the other costs that come with home ownership. Somebody in the crowd had mentioned to me that there are benefits to renting versus having a mortgage. And that's true. Having a property is a good thing, and it may make sense for you, but it comes with a lot of expenses. There is something to be said for being able to rent, not having to worry about anything that goes wrong with the property, and being able to invest and move freely. And that might work for certain people's lifestyles. If you're like me, Ahmar, you might want to say, okay, no, I want to take on as much debt possible and go buy a property or two, right? But the key here is that you're going to eventually use those properties for something, right? I'm going to pause right here. Do we have any other questions? Go for it. No, tell me. Yeah. An RRSP. Yeah. RESPs if you have a baby. Different discussion. I'm just kidding. So it depends. I personally would do my tax-free savings account, but depends on your personal situation, right? So if you pop that 10 grand into your RRSP, you're going to get a deduction off your income. So if your income's high that year and you want to save some of your taxes and you don't own a property and nothing like that, and you plan on using that money at some point, RRSP is not a bad thing. On the flip side, you can also keep that money invested for years and not have to worry about it until you retire. And when you retire, your income is going to be much lower. You're not going to be working. So you're going to be drawing out your RRSPs. You're going to convert them into what's called a retirement income fund and use them as a pension at some point in your life. Now, most people freak out about RRSPs because they're like, I'm going to pay all the taxes when I retire. Well, you are going to pay taxes, but you're going to be at a lower tax bracket, and you're not paying taxes on 25 years worth of gains and 25 years worth of contributions in one sitting. You're going to be withdrawing money on a monthly basis. The money you withdraw is what's taxed. Now, I like the tax-free savings account because I like liquidity. I like being able to use that money if I need to for other things, right? If I want to go buy a property, if I want to go on a nice vacation, if I want to, whatever it is, right? A tax-free savings account is highly liquid. If it's in mutual funds, stocks, anything outside of a GIC, you can take the money out at any time you want. It can be in your account in 24 hours. So depends on really what you prioritize, right? I hope that really answered your question. Do we have any other questions right now? Please. Yeah, for sure. Somebody had actually asked me a couple questions earlier about credit. I can't remember who it was. It was you that asked me about. Yeah. Who here has a credit card? Yeah. No credit card? We're going to talk about that afterwards. Okay. Can anybody tell me whether they have what kind of credit card they have? Cashback, points? Both. Okay. All right. Who here has more than 2 credit cards? Who here has more than 3 credit cards? Leila. Okay. Who here has more than 4 credit cards? All right. Okay. So, guys, credit is a gun. Full blown. You can take that gun and shoot yourself right in the foot. Or you can point that gun and further your goals in life. Okay? Too many credit cards are something that scare the living daylights out of a financial advisor. It's a lot of unsecured credit at high interest sitting there available to you. Now, most people are not bozos. They're not going to go out and max out all their credit cards. But at the same time, when you do any credit applications, home equity lines of credit, mortgages, anything like that, we will hold that stuff against you. We will look at your 4 or 5 credit cards, and if you have $20,000 limits on each one of those credit cards, that's $80,000 worth of credit card limits. We're going to ask you to reduce those. Who here knows what their credit score is? I'm not going to ask what your credit score is, don't worry. Okay. Does anybody really know how a credit score usually is calculated? By all means, rock, paper, scissors for it. How long you've had a credit card open for? Yep, huge thing. Yep. Tell me about credit utilization for a second, because there's a very specific number I want you guys all to kind of keep an eye on. Close. So, your credit utilization is 35%. That's the magic number. 30 safer, yes. But the actual number that these guys go off is 35%. If you have a $1,000 limit and you go over $350, that will drop your score a little bit. What are the other factors that typically make up a good credit score? if you're a credit seeker, we actually have a term for you. If you're one of those people that go from bank to bank getting a different credit card, we actually identify you as what's called a credit seeker, and we will be a little bit more hesitant in the amount of money that we will lend you. What's that? For sure, you're right. But I would also argue that if you're going from bank to bank and applying for credit products, that's a credit check every single time. Yeah, yeah. So it comes down to multiple factors, right? How much credit's available to you, how you're using your credit, your time frame in paying back your credit is a huge thing. One missed payment is not going to break you. Two missed payments is not going to break you. A history of missed payments is going to drop your score significantly. Collections, forget about it. We will not lend anything to you, right? What's a good credit score? Nope. 800 is excellent. Anything above 725, the bank will pretty much say, here, take it, right? Even if you have more than 3 credit cards, you'll be fine. It's okay. That's fine. It's how you use those credit cards, right? So I have a use for one credit card. I myself only have 2 credit cards. I use one of them as for all of my stuff, my household expenses, vacations, all that kind of stuff. And I have another card just in case I want to go do online shopping. I don't have to worry about putting a $20,000 limit. It's got a $1,000 limit on it. Highly suggest having a strategy in how you use your credit cards, right? So it's okay having 3 credit cards. What's not okay is having 4 credit cards with $25,000 limits on each one of them, right? That's going to hold you back, right? That's going to be lending that we can't give you because there's 2 kinds of lending. There's secured, meaning that you're giving us a security, such as a home or a car, and there's unsecured. Unsecured is your credit cards, your unsecured lines of credit, that kind of stuff. So unsecured credit cards, unsecured lending typically comes with a much higher interest rate. So your credit card is at what percentage? 23.99 or 22.99 or 21.99? It's high interest. Secured credit is typically at much lower interest, at prime or prime plus 0.5 or prime plus 1. Okay? Now, how you use that credit that's available, it's entirely up to you, but I encourage you, look at that as money that you can utilize. Not credit cards so much, but lines of credit. If I can borrow money for 7 or 8% and I can go make 15% on it, well, I just made 7% on my money, right? That's what we call leverage investing or leverage trading, that kind of stuff, right? More than one with balances sitting on them or unused, when you come to apply for a mortgage, it's going to factor in for sure. It's going to eat away at some of your lending. But because you don't have a balance owing on it, the bank can just say, hey, close it off, right? But if you have a $50,000 unsecured line of credit and there's $50,000 of balance on it, the bank is going to say, okay, we can't give you the $600,000 mortgage. We'll give you $500,000. The rest of it, you go pay off that line or you're on your own, right? Please. We make you sign a leveraging disclosure. I have lots of clients that throughout COVID, even this last year, have come to me and said, hey, take $200,000 off my line of credit and go put it into this fund or this market or this stock or whatever it is, right? We make them sign a leveraging disclosure, meaning that even if you lose the value of that stock, you're still on the hook for that money and the interest on it, okay? Calculated risk, yeah. Do you have any other questions? Please. Yes, so it depends on really how, who here has a mobile banking app on their phone? Most big banks nowadays actually work with 2 companies that hold your credit. Can anybody tell me what those 2 companies are? TransUnion and Equifax, okay? If you're going to TransUnion and you're saying, I want a credit report, and they have to keep supplying you one, that could damage your credit. one of those things I don't really advise doing. Most people have a way of checking their credit through their online banking app on their phone. If you're CIBC, it says check credit score. That's not a credit hit. See, Equifax or TransUnion actually gives us your credit every quarter or every 3 months or so, and that's what you see. Now that is not a 100% accurate score, but it's close enough that you kind of know where you're sitting, whether or not we'll give you money or not, pretty much, okay? It's gonna be a credit check. It will, but typically having how often are you applying for a new telephone? Not every 2 months. The frequency plays a huge role. When I went to go get a car loan or to apply for my car, they had to check my credit. But I wasn't doing 6 of them in a month. I was doing one. It was my one credit check in 6 months. So yeah, it might have dropped my score maybe a point or two, but by the time I made my first payment, my score had come right back up, right? So it makes a big difference how frequent you're checking your credit and what time frame, right? And also whether it's like a hard credit check, right? Like if you're going to Rogers and you're fighting with them and then you're going to tell us the next month and they're doing a credit check, well, yeah, you're checking your credit too often. It's got to stop, right? Stop it. Do we have any other questions? So guys, I mean, there's going to be, like the next year is going to be a pretty weird time, right? The stock market's still volatile. Interest rates are still very high. Housing has still not come down to a reasonable level to buy, right? At least for myself, right? Like a regular detached home is still well over $1 million, right? There is hope for the next year, and this is where I really want you all to focus on taking advantage of the point of time we're at. Every single time the market's pulled back over the last 30 years, there's been a transfer of wealth. People have seen the opportunity, they've invested in it, and they've ridden it out, and they've been able to make some money. So utilize your tax-free savings accounts. Utilize your RSPs. If you're looking to purchase a home over the next 6 months to 9 months, there's going to be opportunities available to you, right? You have any other questions at the moment? Please. Yeah. That was a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. This is a tough one. This is a very touchy subject, right? Estate planning. We're all fairly young. Nobody's really thinking about what happens if God forbid, I or my loved ones get hit by a bus tomorrow or we're no longer with us or whatever it is, right? I mean, on our way to church today, I don't know if anybody saw, there was a bunch of firefighters and stuff right out there. Pretty much what we do on our end is we work to make sure that if your family's going to go through something, the only thing that they're going to be dealing with is the grief of loss. Dealing with finances and wills and all that kind of stuff and have to deal with grief on top of it is not something anybody wants to go through. I have seen it plenty of times, and it is genuinely stressful and heartbreaking. So a lot of us have parents that are a little bit older, and being from the background that we are, our parents might not necessarily talk to us about finances. That's a stigma that needs to change. We need to talk to our folks and say, what happens if, God forbid, something happens to you? How do your assets get transferred over? How do we make sure that the government of Canada does not take any more in taxes than they are entitled to? So what we typically do is when we're talking to a client who has a tax-free savings account, RSPs, checking accounts, investments, all that kind of stuff, we talk to them about beneficiaries. So plenty of you have indicated to me that you have a tax-free savings account. When they were setting up your tax-free savings account, they did tell you or ask you, what happens if something happens to me to my tax-free savings account? Where does that go? Anybody have that conversation with you? And When they had that conversation with you, they asked you to set up a beneficiary. Great. If they didn't do that, they didn't do their job. Anytime you have an investment, RSPs, tax-frees, even a checking or savings, you need to have a succession plan. More so not for us, but more so for our parents' generation. That means having a discussion around a power of attorney. What happens when you get older and I need to make more decisions based off your finances for you, right? And we see a lot of that. Keep in mind, the demographics in Canada are changing. We have a very large population that's 50 and over, and that generation has a lot of wealth, and they're going to need to transfer that wealth very smoothly, right? So first things first is making sure that beneficiaries are up to date on your tax-frees and RSPs. If you have very old parents and you've had the discussion with them, it might make sense for you to be joint on their checking account and savings account. Now, can anybody tell me what happens if you have a parent who, God forbid, if something happens to them and you're joint on their checking account or savings account, what happens to that money? It stays in the account, but more importantly, how's the transfer of ownership? It's very easy. It's smooth. God forbid something happens to your mom or dad or grandma or whatever, and you're joint on that account, simple ownership. The moment they get a death certificate and the estate is settled and all that, very simple ownership. If you have beneficiaries on your tax-free, or I actually have this discussion as well with people who are married, but when you do get married, if you plan on it, you want to put your spouse specifically on your tax-free savings account as a successor holder, not a beneficiary. Successor holder means that, God forbid, if something happens to me, my wife is going to be able to assume my tax-free savings account without having to cash out all my investments. She will just have that tax-free savings account. So now she'll have her own with her investments and mine with her investments. No sale triggered, no nothing. Whereas a beneficiary, typically we have a sale that's triggered and it's as of date of death, okay? Same thing with your RRSPs, okay? Very important distinctions. Non-registered investments, that means that you don't have them in a tax-free savings account and you don't have them in an RRSP. We cannot add beneficiaries on those types of investments. You cannot have a succession plan. You have to have somebody joint on that investment for them to assume ownership of it. So keep in mind, big differences between joint, beneficiary, and successor. That kind of answers some of it. Also very important for you to have an updated will for yourself or your parents. Remember, everybody in this room is very young, but that doesn't mean that nothing could happen to us, right? We want to make sure that we all work hard for our money. I don't want Trudeau getting more taxes than he should. I want to make sure my family gets more of my money that I've worked for, right? Do we have any questions at that point? Please. Ooh. The estate. Your estate. So if you have money left over from your estate, the bank needs to get paid. If you have debt you took on, it's going to get paid, right? Your estate does. Yeah. So, God forbid, if there's, money left over in the estate, a portion of that money will go to, or all of it will go towards covering that debt. Whatever's in excess goes to the beneficiaries of the estate. It's going to go to your estate, and if nobody claims that estate, I've never seen this situation happen, but it will eventually go to the government. So typically, you'd have a will that dictates, this is who I want to get my money. If you don't have a will, then yes, your next of kin will be identified. The government will actually step in. There will be probate. There'll be a bunch of different things. I can actually, if you have any questions about estate planning or anything, actually reach out to me. We do a pretty good presentation for some of our senior residents, our senior clients. But I think it would be beneficial just for your own knowledge to kind of know as well. This kind of touches upon a couple of it. Any questions? Don't be shy. Canada doesn't have an inheritance tax. It's just how that money is going to get transferred over. That is more of a question of, so I'll tell you, I have a lot of clients that come to me and say, I want to help my kid buy a house. Okay, write them a gift letter. The CRA just needs to know about it. That doesn't mean they're going to tax them on it. But if you're talking about giving your son or daughter $1 million, the government's going to have something to say about it, right? That's more of a question that I would say, even what we do is we pertain to an accountant. We reach out to a tax specialist and we say, this is a situation, what do we do here, right? It's not something I generally advise on. I mean, unless it's investments and stuff like that, moving funds over and stuff, we do talk about that, right? I'm gonna stop right here. Does anybody have anything they want to talk to me about? Anything they want to discuss? Any finance topics that they've been sitting on that they're kind of concerned about? Not personally, but you can always reach out to me personally if you do. I'm going to wrap up with one more quiz, okay? Now, we have some gift cards here. So, this is going to be the hot seat. My top 5 are going to get gift cards. Well, actually, you already got one. So, top 4, okay? You're not going to get another one, all right? Can anybody tell me what an ETF is? What does it stand for? Three, 2, 1. There you go. Good. Can you tell me what the difference is before I go on to this? What's the difference between an exchange-traded fund and a mutual fund? %. Kind of a trick question. They're very, very similar. Exchange-traded funds and mutual funds are, the real only difference between them is how they're traded. An exchange-traded fund is traded like a stock, meaning that throughout the day it changes in value. A mutual fund is traded based off something called net asset value, which is calculated at the end of the day, okay? Yeah, S&P and all that stuff. I already did this one. Bear with me here 1 second. Who's Canada's largest bank? The largest bank we have in Canada. RBC. So, fun fact, Royal Bank could actually buy the next 3 banks outright. They can buy CIBC outright if they want to. Yeah. What does IPO stand for? We didn't really talk about, truthfully stocks and all that stuff, but what does IPO stand for? Okay, what happens when a company does an IPO? %. If you own a stock of a company, what could happen to your money? Anybody. It could go down. You could lose it all, right? Sorry, this one was really lame. This was an easy one. This is also an easy one, but I'll give it to you anyways. What's the name of the Central Bank of Canada? What's the name of the Central Bank of Canada? There you go. Stupid. What's a hedge fund? I'm gonna drop it into 3 answers or 3 options. Only one's right. Is a hedge fund a mutual fund? Stock? Private investment fund? There we go. What's the world's reserve currency? Beautiful. Oh, I can tell you it's not going to be the Egyptian pound. It's funny, I have every single time there's any kind of market volatility, like stock market goes down, when COVID happened, all that stuff, we get an influx of people that come and say, I want to buy gold. hard gold, not I want to buy gold stock. They come and actually order gold reserves from us. So I have an older Asian gentleman who comes periodically twice a year and says, and he buys $400,000 worth of actual gold bullion. An armored truck gets it delivered to the branch, and his armored truck comes in, picks it up, and drops it off at his house. He does, yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's in his house or he's got we won't allow him to use our safety deposit boxes. I've never been in his house. I don't know. I don't ask those questions. Let me put it to you like this. Last year, he spent close to $900,000 just on pure gold. I'm sure his house is big enough for a proper safe. So, yeah, please. No, that's not true. So actually, if you look at your safety deposit box contract, one, we don't want to know what's in there. Two, we advise you strongly, because remember, those safety deposit boxes are not insured. We advise you not to keep things that could be destroyed very easily. So we don't want to know. We don't insure it. You can come and use our facilities, but it's still on you. So be careful. Yeah. So when I first started at the bank, there was this one guy who used to come in once every couple months, and we'd put him in a specific room once he got his box, and all you'd hear is shh, 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 shh. He was counting cash. And our branch manager told him, hey, listen, I hope you don't have cash in there. And he made a genuine complaint to our back office saying, he can't talk to me about what's in there. It's supposed to be confidential. So we do advise not to do any of that stuff, but it's also really none of our business as well. Does anybody have any other questions? I know I talked about, kind of random topics. I kind of wanted today to be more of a discussion. I'm here to take any questions. If you want, I'll leave my number up at some point. But beyond that, if finances are one of those things that are extremely personal and different from person to person. Your financial plan is not going to be the same as the person across from you. And that's okay, because your financial position is not going to be the same as the next person. What is important is for you to actually go out there and get the help, the professional help. If you're sick, you're going to go to a doctor. If your tooth hurts, you're going to go to a dentist. If your eyes have an issue, you're going to go to an optometrist. Your finances, go seek professional help. And don't seek it from just one individual. Go and talk to a couple. Beyond that, if there's no other questions, I'm going to end it right here, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any more. Okay.
Thank you so much. Can we have another round of applause? Thank you. Thanks so much. So next week we will be having our community service social, so make sure to be here. We're also going to be serving some food, so let us know if you have any feedback. We'll take that in consideration for next week, and ensure that you look into the emails for all the details. If you want to be added on the list, let us know, as well as myself volunteering, or any of the volunteers as well. If you are new, please give us a little hand if you're first or second time, just to help us all together to welcome you yourselves and be in one community. And that is pretty much all the announcements. So if we can have everyone to stand up to pray, and then we can continue with all the lovely pizza and stick around as well. Thanks. Anyone would like to pray for us? Okay.
Lord, we praise your name and we thank you for gathering us together, and hear us when we all pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven,